Hey, what's up, everyone? So this will be the 82nd opening I'll be sharing with you, which is the Bet Piau Continuation 1. Not exactly sure why it's named that way. I'm guessing somebody's name variation for PL. So if you know how it originated, feel free to leave a comment down below and share with everyone why this opening name was named that way. But this is kind of like an extension or a variation from the typical bat opening. So we'll just kind of run through the sequence up to the bat. So instead of playing the usual d3, black plays this. So white cuts into the diagonal. This is probably by far one of the most common sequences from the bat continuation. And over here, I would say more players play f7, which is kind of like the typical bat continuation. But instead of f7 over here, bat piao continuation 1 actually goes to d3, which kind of starts off the continuation 1 variation. So this the benefit is that it might surprise your opponent a little bit. I think I've seen Michel Borassi from Italy, who is now based out of Switzerland, one of the former world champions in 2008, I think. He actually plays this variation, I think, against diagonal users, perhaps. So I think this is kind of interesting. I would say the follow-up moves it's fairly similar to the analysis that we did for bat opening in a sense that I think one of the variations I ran through was white playing to f4 and then black potentially playing to b5, keeping b6 poisoned. And essentially, I would say that this is intuitive for white. This is also intuitive, fairly intuitive for black. Of course, you also have that other option to b6 and maybe even f7 because you're playing on the tail end of this kind of advancement by white to f4. So if you were to play the tail end, then white probably it's a bit harder for white to kind of come to the conclusion to do a white and give up an easy black to c4 on the face value perhaps. But I think this is still fairly simple to play against this lead diagonal that was just established. Uh, so the actual continuation actually goes with, I think the more common continuation that I've seen goes with b5. So similar to the bat opening, this is kind of the typical sequence, and it's very intuitive for both sides because the handling of the edge is actually kind of like a standard handling of such a shape. So if you don't know this edge configuration or playout, you kind of need to know that when you see this kind of line established, you might want to break it to feed off the unbalance, and at the same time you need to make sure that there isn't any black disc poisoning yourself. So I would say that this opening is mostly initiated by black, since white typically follows that sequence up to maybe e3, and your variation, you don't play d3 and you play to e7. So this is kind of like a standard sequence follow up, and then over here, black would then play to the center at g5. Reason being, you probably don't want to play f3 first, even though it's a box, because you remove e3, that kind of unpoisons white's b6, and it allows white to kind of use this strong edge to kind of form a very balanced edge along the sixth row. So if you allow white to do that, it will become very easy for white to kind of run you out of moves. So you definitely have to keep the e3 white disc there just to keep this poison. And also probably one of the reasons why you selected b5 at the starting of the opening is to kind of retain b6 as a poison move. So there's absolutely no reason to play f3 here, but rather you can jump into g5. I would say it's fairly simple for white to kind of jump into h4 or h6 easily based on this sequence here. So I would say this opening is very intuitive for both players, so it's easy to play, but at the same time, it doesn't really give your opponent much options to make mistakes. So I think I would highly recommend this for advanced players and above, but probably for players who are playing against someone who you know is stronger than you, and you just want to kind of stick close as much as possible to the game, at least for the evaluation, all the way to the later part of the game, so you have more opportunities. So even this kind of slot in, it's kind of predictable because you just want to feed off this edge and probably potentially capture it. But in this case, the best move for white, as per the software, it's recommending a5. I think b4 it's harder to play Maybe c3 with the feet is still more playable, but over here this is kind of reasonable because white is controlling this edge and also all the mini diagonals that are cutting out to these three external squares that black doesn't have access to right now. So black would then be forced to play an x square, which is totally fine because if white captures the corner, black can wedge and capture this corner. So perfectly fine for black to just jump in. So I would say maybe it's harder to tell between the difference between c3 and a4 perhaps in this situation. But yeah, given that you know the logic about trying to play towards perhaps the center box first. So this being the last box within the last square within that box, it becomes heavily weighted. So that could be potentially one of the reasons why, because c3 it's a potentially higher opportunity for your opponent to kind of remove that disc after the play out to the top left. So essentially, that is the Bet Piao Continuation 1 opening. So hopefully, this video helps you in your game, and yeah, you can use it probably against players who you think are stronger than yourself. So thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.